She stood in the center of a glittering ballroom, surrounded by 200 of Boston's wealthiest elite. Wearing a dress
Ladies and
her
gentlemen,
sister-in-law
it is with
had
great
chosen
sadness that I
specifically
must reveal
to
the truth
humiliate
about
her.
Miss Cole's
Her
involvement in the
mother-in-law
recent
held a
scandal.
microphone.
She betrayed
Her
our
husband
trust.
stood beside his pregnant mistress. And every single person in that room was about to watch her life be destroyed.
What did she do?
They called her
I
a
heard she
thief.
stole the necklace.
They called her a gold digger.
Look at her dress.
They offered
it's a
her
mess.
$100,000 to disappear and never come back. What they did not know, the woman they were trying to destroy had secretly built a $47 million empire. While they mocked her thrift store clothes,
Did you know
she
this
was
would
running a
happen?
company worth more than their entire family fortune. But here is where the story gets interesting. She did not reveal her secret that night. She let them humiliate her. She let them arrest her. She let them think they had won. Because Margaret Cole was not just wealthy. She was patient. And she was about to teach the Harrison family a lesson they would never forget. What happens when a woman who has been underestimated her entire life finally decides to fight back? What happens when the people who tried to destroy her discover that she was the most dangerous person in the room all along? This is a story about survival, about secrets, about the kind of revenge that does not come from anger, but from strategy. And I promise you, you will not see the ending coming. Value statement and story meaning. Before we begin, let me tell you why this story matters. This is not just entertainment. This is a blueprint. Every woman who has ever been told she was not good enough, every person who has been dismissed because of where they came from, every survivor who built themselves from nothing while the world looked the other way, this story is for you. You will learn why documenting everything can save your life. You will understand why a secret freedom fund is the most important investment you will ever make. And you will see exactly what happens when patient people finally decide to stop being patient. The meaning of this story is simple. Where you come from does not determine where you end up. The people who underestimate you are giving you your greatest advantage. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the most powerful one. The mirror never lies, but Margaret Cole Harrison had learned to lie to it. She stood in the cramped guest bathroom of the Wellesley Colonial at 5:15 in the morning. The October darkness pressing against the frosted window like something hungry. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the heating system and the soft sounds of her husband Nathaniel sleeping in the master bedroom down the hall. She had not slept in that room for 8 months now. He needed space, he said. He was stressed about work, he said. The fund was underperforming, he said. She understood, she said. She understood far more than he would ever know. Maggie studied her reflection in the vanity mirror, cataloging the woman she saw there, 34 years old, brown hair that fell past her shoulders, in waves she had learned to tame, with products that cost less than what Genevieve Harrison spent on a single lunch, hazel eyes that had seen too much and learned to show too little. A face that could be pretty, she supposed, if she tried, but trying attracted attention, and attention was dangerous. So she applied makeup, designed to make her look like she was not wearing any, foundation that matched her skin exactly, mascara that lengthened but did not dramatize, lip color that could pass for natural. The goal was not to enhance. The goal was to disappear. Her third foster mother had taught her that, Janine Whitmore, the one who had lasted almost 2 years before the state moved Maggie again. Janine had been a hairdresser with gentle hands and hard-won wisdom, and she had taken one look at the skinny, frightened 8-year-old the social worker deposited on her doorstep and seen something worth saving. A woman without her own money is a woman without choices, Janine used to say, usually while braiding Maggie's hair before school. And a woman who shows what she has is a woman who gets it taken away. You learn to keep things hidden, baby girl. You learn to survive. Maggie had been 8 years old. She had never forgotten. She finished with the makeup and reached beneath the sink, past the cleaning supplies and extra toilet paper and the basket of guest soaps that Genevieve had insisted she stock, even though no guests ever came. Her fingers found the hollowed-out book she had placed there 3 years ago, a hardcover copy of Pride and Prejudice that no one in this house would ever think to open. Inside was a phone. Not the phone Nate knew about, the one with the cracked screen that he said she did not need to replace because she barely used it anyway. This phone was new, purchased with cash from a store in Worcester, registered under a name that existed only on paper. This phone was encrypted with software that would take the NSA a week to crack. This phone connected her to the life she had built in the shadows, while everyone around her assumed she was nothing. 12 notifications waited for her. Her financial consulting platform, ClearPath Advisory, had processed $43,000 in transactions overnight. 3 new enterprise clients had signed contracts, totaling another $90,000 in annual revenue. Ruth had sent a message at midnight. "Call me when you can. Important. We need to talk about the Morrison account." Maggie allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the warmth of that success, to remember who she really was beneath the mask of the disappointing daughter-in-law. She had built ClearPath from nothing, from a laptop she bought at a pawn shop, from free Wi-Fi at public libraries, from nights spent studying accounting and finance. While Nate thought she was watching television downstairs because she did not want to disturb his sleep. She had started with small clients, individuals who needed help managing their money but could not afford the fancy firms that charged hundreds of dollars an hour. She had grown through word of mouth, through referrals, through the radical act of treating people with respect regardless of how much money they had. Now ClearPath was worth $47 million. She had 93 employees she had never met in person. She had contracts with companies whose names appeared in the Wall Street Journal. She had built an empire while pretending to be a housewife who could barely balance a checkbook. And no one knew, not Nate, not his mother, not the army of Harrison family lawyers and accountants who surely would have discovered everything if they had ever thought to look. But why would they look? Margaret Cole Harrison was nobody. Margaret Cole Harrison was a charity case, a gold digger, white trash who had somehow fooled their golden boy into marriage. Margaret Cole Harrison did not merit investigation. That was exactly how she wanted it. She deleted her browsing history, powered down the phone, and tucked it back into its hiding place. Then she checked her reflection one final time, adjusted a strand of hair that had fallen out of place, and went downstairs to make breakfast for a man who did not love her. The kitchen was her favorite room in the house, though she would never admit that to anyone. It was large and modern, all granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, designed by an interior decorator whose name Genevieve dropped at every opportunity. But in the early morning, before the rest of the world woke up, it belonged to Maggie. The first light of dawn creeping through the windows, the smell of coffee brewing, the simple pleasure of routine. She moved through the space with practiced efficiency, pulling eggs from the refrigerator, bread from the pantry, butter from its dish by the stove. Nate liked his eggs scrambled soft, his toast barely brown, his coffee exactly 175 degrees with 2 sugars and a splash of cream. She had learned his preferences with the attention of a woman who knew that small comforts purchased temporary peace. She was plating the eggs when she heard him coming down the stairs. His footsteps were heavy, irritated, the tread of a man who resented having to wake up at all. She arranged her face into pleasant neutrality and turned. "Good morning," she said. Nate grunted without looking at her. He was already scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowed, his jaw tight. He was handsome in the way that money made men handsome, with a sharp jaw and professionally cut hair and clothes that were pressed by someone whose name he did not know. When Maggie had met him 6 years ago at a coffee shop in Cambridge, she had thought his smile was kind. She had thought his interest in her story, her background, her dreams, was genuine. She had thought maybe, finally, she had found someone who would see her. She had been wrong about so many things. "The gala is tonight," she said, setting his plate on the table, pouring his coffee into the travel mug he preferred. "Should I meet you there? Or are we driving together?" That got his attention. He looked up, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or irritation. With Nate, they had become increasingly difficult to distinguish. "Together," he said, his voice flat. "Mother would have a fit if we arrived separately. She has the press there, photographers, the whole production. She is announcing some new scholarship fund or something." He paused, his eyes traveling over Maggie with the assessment of a man evaluating a purchase he regretted. "Wear something appropriate, okay? This is important. The Ashworth family will be there. Bradley's father controls half the private equity in New England. If we land this investment, it could save." He stopped himself, took a sip of coffee, checked his phone again. "Save what?" Maggie asked, careful to keep her voice light, curious, unthreatening. "Nothing, just, it is a big deal. Do not embarrass me." "I know," Maggie said. "I have the navy dress, the one from—" Nate's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Not that one. Wear something Chloe picks out. She is coming over this afternoon to help you get ready. She knows what is appropriate for these events." The words landed like small, precise wounds, each one calibrated for maximum damage with minimum effort. Chloe Harrison, Nate's younger sister, had made it her personal mission over the past 5 years to ensure that Maggie never forgot her place in the family hierarchy, which was to say, no place at all. But Maggie had learned long ago that battles were won through strategy, not confrontation. She smiled. "That sounds lovely," she said. "I will text her to confirm." Nate nodded, already returning to his phone, already dismissing her. He grabbed his travel mug and his laptop bag and headed for the door. Then he paused, his hand on the frame, half turning back. "Maggie, yes?" He did not look at her. "Just, try tonight. Really try, for me." The door closed behind him. Maggie stood alone in the kitchen that cost more than the trailer park where she had spent her 7th year, and she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what her marriage had become. Then she pulled out her secret phone and called Ruth. Her business partner answered on the first ring, her voice warm and gravelly, and instantly comforting. "Mija, I was just about to call you again. We have a problem." Ruth Mendez had been the first person in Maggie's adult life to see her clearly. They had met in a community college accounting class when Maggie was 19, and Ruth was 46, both of them starting over in different ways. Ruth had spent 20 years with the IRS, clawing her way up from secretary to senior auditor, before burnout and a bad divorce had sent her looking for a new path. She had watched the quiet girl in the front row ace every exam while working 3 jobs, and she had recognized something in her that others had missed. Potential, hunger, the particular intelligence of someone who had learned to survive. They had become study partners, then friends, then something closer to family. When Maggie started ClearPath, Ruth had been her first hire, her most trusted advisor, the only person in the world who knew exactly how much the quiet housewife from Wellesley was actually worth. "What kind of problem?" Maggie asked, moving to the window to watch Nate's BMW disappear down the tree-lined street, Someone has been poking around our financials. Ruth's voice was careful, controlled, the tone she used when delivering bad news. Quiet inquiries, shell companies requesting information. I traced one of them back to a law firm in Boston, specifically to Whitmore and Associates. Maggie's blood went cold. That is the Harrison family's law firm. I know. That is not possible. She does not know about the business. Nobody knows. I have been so careful. Somebody knows something, Ruth replied. I do not have the full picture yet. The inquiries are oblique, fishing expeditions more than targeted investigations. But someone is looking, Mia. And given the timing, I do not think it is a coincidence. The timing. The gala tonight. The way Nate had looked at her this morning. Guilt and irritation fighting for dominance. What do you think is happening? Maggie asked. I think, Ruth said slowly, that something has changed. I think you need to be very careful tonight. Watch your back. And maybe, just maybe, start thinking about an exit strategy. I have been thinking about that for 3 years. Then maybe it is time to stop thinking and start planning. After the call ended, Maggie stood motionless in her silent kitchen, watching the morning light strengthen through the windows. The Harrison family had spent 5 years treating her like dirt beneath their designer shoes. They called her white trash when they thought she could not hear. They excluded her from family photos. They made pointed comments about breeding and background and the importance of marrying well. They had made it abundantly clear that Nathaniel Harrison III had married beneath him, and they were simply waiting for him to come to his senses. But they had never actively investigated her. They had never considered her important enough to investigate. Something had changed, and Maggie had a terrible feeling that tonight, at the gala, she was going to find out what. She looked at the invitation on the counter, the thick cream cardstock with the embossed Harrison Family Foundation logo. Genevieve had sent it with a handwritten note in her elegant, terrible script. Do try to be on time, Margaret. First impressions matter, even for those making them repeatedly. Maggie picked up the invitation and studied it. Every instinct she had developed in 18 years of foster care, in 20 years of building herself from nothing, was screaming at her. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But she had survived worse than the Harrison family. She had survived parents who abandoned her, foster homes that broke her, a system designed to make children like her disappear. She had clawed her way from nothing to a secret empire worth $47 million, all while playing the role of the disappointing daughter-in-law. Whatever they were planning, she would face it. She would survive it. She always did. She just had to get through one more night. The afternoon arrived with Chloe Harrison and 2 garment bags full of humiliation. Maggie opened the front door to find her sister-in-law already pushing past her, phone pressed to her ear, voice pitched in the performative brightness of someone who was always performing. No, I am literally at her house right now, Chloe was saying, loud enough for Maggie to hear every word. I know, it is like a charity project. Someone has to help her, right? She is completely hopeless. Hold on. Let me send you a picture of what she was going to wear. You are going to die. She held up her phone, snapping a photo of Maggie before Maggie could react, then returned to her conversation with a theatrical sigh. See? I told you. It is tragic. Okay, love you, bye-bye. She hung up and turned to Maggie with a smile that did not come within a mile of her eyes. Chloe Harrison was 28 years old, professionally blonde, and engaged to Bradley Ashworth, whose family money made the Harrisons look like struggling middle class. She had built a modest social media following by posting about her perfect life, her perfect fiancé, and her dedication to helping those less fortunate than herself. Maggie had learned that less fortunate usually meant her. Maggie, Chloe said, drawing out the name like it tasted unpleasant. We have so much work to do. Let us see what we are dealing with. What followed was an hour of subtle cruelty disguised as sisterly assistance. Chloe swept through Maggie's closet like a tornado, pulling out garments and holding them up with expressions of escalating horror. She photographed the worst pieces, adding captions that Maggie could not see but could easily imagine. She made Maggie try on dress after dress from the garment bags she had brought, each one somehow wrong in a different way. The burgundy made her look washed out. The black was too severe. The floral was too young, or was it too old? Chloe could not decide. The green clashed with her complexion. The gray was depressing. On and on it went, a parade of rejection that left Maggie standing in her underwear in the middle of her own bedroom, while her sister-in-law circled her like a predator evaluating wounded prey. Finally, after what felt like hours, Chloe presented her choice. It was pink. Not a soft, flattering pink, but an aggressive, dated pink that had been fashionable perhaps 5 years ago. The cut was boxy, unflattering, designed for a body type that was not Maggie's. The fabric was cheap, despite its designer label, the kind of material that wrinkled if you looked at it wrong. Perfect, Chloe declared, holding the dress up against Maggie's body. It is so you. Maggie looked at herself in the mirror. The dress made her look washed out and shapeless, older than her years, exactly like the charity case the Harrisons believed her to be. It was, she understood, exactly the point. Thank you, she said, because she had learned that the fastest way through these encounters was compliance. Resistance only prolonged the torture. It is lovely, Chloe beamed, already tapping on her phone. I am going to post about this. My followers love a makeover story. It really shows my philanthropic side, you know? Like, I do not just donate money, I donate my time, my expertise. She angled the camera toward Maggie. Smile. Maggie smiled. Now let us talk about hair, Chloe continued, circling behind Maggie to examine her head with the intensity of a scientist studying a particularly disappointing specimen. We cannot do anything about the color, obviously. Not enough time, but maybe if we pull it back, tight? It would help with the, you know. She gestured vaguely at Maggie's face. The what? Maggie asked, her voice carefully neutral. You know. Chloe waved her hand again, the whole situation. By the time Chloe left, satisfied with her work, Maggie stood alone in her bedroom staring at the pink dress laid out on the bed like evidence at a crime scene. She thought about the navy dress hanging in the back of her closet, the one she had bought with her own money from a small boutique in Cambridge, the one that fit her perfectly and made her feel like the woman she actually was instead of the woman the Harrisons needed her to be. Then she thought about Ruth's warning. Someone was investigating her. Someone knew something. Tonight was not the night to draw attention, not the night to deviate from the script the Harrisons had written for her. She would wear the pink dress. She would pull her hair back tight. She would smile and nod and be invisible, the same way she had been invisible for 5 years. But before she left, she did one thing for herself. She opened her jewelry box, a simple wooden case that had been a gift from Janine, her third foster mother, on the day Maggie had aged out of the system. Inside, beneath the costume jewelry and the practical pieces, was a small velvet pouch. She opened it and pulled out a bracelet. Simple pearls, not expensive, but luminous in the afternoon light. They had been a gift from her neighbor Helen, the retired family court judge, who lived alone in the house next door and who had become something like a grandmother to Maggie over the past 3 years. Helen Kowalski had noticed Maggie on her first day in the neighborhood, had watched through her window as the young wife struggled to carry groceries from her car while her husband sat inside, doing nothing, had made a point of introducing herself, of inviting Maggie over for tea, of listening with the patient attention of someone who had spent 30 years hearing the worst of what families did to each other. "These were my mother's," Helen had said, pressing the bracelet into Maggie's hands on a cold December afternoon last year. She survived the Depression, 2 bad husbands, and raising 5 children alone. She used to say pearls were her armor, that they absorbed the negativity around them, every cruel word, every harsh look. They took it so she did not have to. Maggie clasped the bracelet around her wrist and felt, for just a moment, a little less alone. She checked her reflection one final time. The pink dress was as unflattering as she had expected. Her hair, pulled back in the severe style Chloe had insisted on, made her face look pinched and tired. She looked exactly like what the Harrisons wanted her to look like. A woman who did not belong. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she did not recognize. "Tonight is going to be fun. See you there." Maggie stared at the message, a chill running down her spine. She did not respond. She screenshotted it and sent it to Ruth. Then she went downstairs to wait for her husband. Nate arrived home at 6:30, already irritated about something she would never be told. He glanced at her dress and nodded once, apparently satisfied that she looked sufficiently unremarkable. "Ready?" he asked, though it was not really a question. "Ready." They drove to the Boston Harbor Hotel in silence. The city lights smeared past the windows like wet paint, and Maggie watched them blur and blend, trying to quiet the anxiety that churned in her stomach. Something was going to happen tonight. She could feel it in her bones, the same instinct that had kept her alive through 18 years of foster care, through countless dangerous situations, through a lifetime of learning to read the weather before the storm hit. She just did not know what form the storm would take. The Harrison Family Foundation annual gala was, according to Genevieve Harrison, the social event of the fall season. She had been telling anyone who would listen for the past 3 months, making certain that everyone who mattered in Boston knew that an invitation to the Harrison Gala was a mark of status, a confirmation of belonging, a ticket to the inner circle of the city's elite. The ballroom at the Boston Harbor Hotel had been transformed into a glittering assault on the senses. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across white linen tablecloths. Thousands of white roses filled towering arrangements on every surface. A string quartet played Vivaldi in one corner, while uniformed servers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than Maggie had spent on groceries for a month in her previous life. 200 guests filled the space, and Maggie felt every single one of them look at her as she entered on Nate's arm. The looks were brief, dismissive, the kind of glances reserved for furniture or staff. They took in her pink dress, her severe hair, her obvious discomfort, and they categorized her instantly. The wife, the embarrassment, the cautionary tale about what happened when Harrison men thought with something other than their heads. Nate felt the looks too. His jaw tightened. His grip on her elbow became almost painful. "Try to look like you belong," he muttered through a smile he had plastered on for the crowd. "I am trying," she said. "Try harder." And then he was gone, pulled into a cluster of men in dark suits who all had the same firm handshake and the same hungry smile, leaving Maggie standing alone at the edge of the ballroom like a piece of driftwood deposited by an indifferent tide. This was the part she had learned to endure, the isolation, the invisibility. She drifted toward the edges of the room, picking up a glass of water from a passing server. Not champagne, never alcohol. She needed her wits sharp and found a position partially hidden by a towering flower arrangement. From here, she could observe without being observed. It was a skill she had developed in childhood, the ability to watch and wait and understand before anyone noticed. she was paying attention. She watched Genevieve Harrison hold court near the stage, resplendent in an emerald green gown that probably cost more than a year of Maggie's foster care stipend. Genevieve was 62 years old, silver-haired and diamond-encrusted, and she moved through the crowd with the absolute certainty of a woman who believed she was the most important person in any room she entered. She watched Arthur Harrison, Nate's father, standing near the bar with a whiskey in his hand and a politician at his elbow. Arthur was softer than his wife, less sharp-edged, but Maggie had learned not to mistake softness for kindness. He had stood by while Genevieve systematically dismantled Maggie's dignity for 5 years. His silence was its own kind of cruelty. She watched Chloe preening for photographs with Bradley Ashworth, her fiancé, showing off the engagement ring that had been the subject of no fewer than 15 social media posts in the past month. Bradley was handsome in a bland, forgettable way, the kind of man who would grow up to look exactly like his father, who stood nearby watching the proceedings with the satisfied expression of a man whose investments were paying off. And she watched the woman near the bar. The woman was watching Nate. She was beautiful in a careful, constructed way, with auburn hair and a dress that managed to be both modest and revealing. She stood slightly apart from the crowd, champagne untouched in her hand, her entire attention focused on Nate with an intensity that made Maggie's stomach clench. Maggie had seen this woman before, in photographs on Nate's phone that he thought she did not know about, in the soft light of his college yearbook, in the dreamy tone of his voice when he had talked, early in their relationship, about the one who got away. Victoria Pemberton, the college girlfriend, the first love, the woman whose shadow had loomed over Maggie's marriage from the very beginning. And as Maggie watched, Victoria's hand drifted to her stomach, resting there with the particular tenderness of early pregnancy. The blood drained from Maggie's face. She reached for her phone, an instinctive need to document, to analyze, to understand what she was seeing and what it meant. But before she could pull it from her clutch, a hand closed around her elbow. Margaret. Genevieve Harrison's voice was ice wrapped in silk, pleasant on the surface, but sharp enough to cut. "Come with me, we need to talk." Genevieve led her through the crowd with the grip of a woman who had never been told no. They passed the bar, the silent auction tables, the string quartet that had moved on to Bach, and finally emerged through a set of glass doors onto a small terrace overlooking the harbor. The October air was cold, sharp with salt and the distant sound of boat horns. The city skyline glittered across the water, beautiful and indifferent. Maggie shivered in her thin dress, but she did not ask to go back inside. She knew better than to show weakness. Genevieve released her arm and turned to face her. In the dim light from the ballroom, her face was all angles and shadows. Ishabam, beautiful in the way that marble statues were beautiful, and about as warm. "I am going to be direct with you, Margaret." Maggie resisted the urge to rub her arm where Genevieve's fingers had dug in. "Of course, Mrs. Harrison, you have been a disappointment to this family since the day my son brought you home." The words landed without softening, without preamble, delivered with the matter-of-fact brutality of a woman who had never had to consider anyone's feelings but her own. "No family," Genevieve continued, ticking off the list on her manicured fingers. "No money, no connections, no breeding, no education worth mentioning. You offered nothing, Margaret. Nothing except whatever temporary physical appeal Nathaniel found in your—" She paused, searching for exactly the right word. "Accessibility. Mrs. Harrison, I do not think this is—" "I am not finished." Genevieve stepped closer, her perfume cloying in the cold air, some French designer scent that probably cost more than Maggie's first car. "I have tolerated you for 5 years because my son has a weakness for projects. Broken things he thinks he can fix, lost causes he believes he can redeem. It is, perhaps, his only real flaw, this unfortunate savior complex. I blame myself, for a time. Perhaps I was too cold when he was a child. Perhaps he was searching for warmth in inappropriate places. She smiled, a thin expression that did not reach her eyes. But warmth fades, Margaret, and projects lose their appeal. And now I find myself with a daughter-in-law who has become not just an embarrassment, but a liability. Maggie's heart began to pound. This was it. Whatever Ruth had warned her about, whatever the strange text message had hinted at, it was coming. I do not know what you mean, she said, careful to keep her voice steady. Oh, I think you do. Genevieve reached into her small, beaded clutch and pulled out a folder. Our family accountant has discovered some irregularities, money moving in patterns that do not make sense. Withdrawals traced to your personal login credentials. Thousands of dollars, Margaret. Disappearing into accounts we cannot identify. She handed over the folder. Maggie opened it with numb fingers. Bank statements, transaction records, her login credentials, highlighted in yellow on page after page, tied to withdrawals she had never made, transfers she had never authorized, money she had never touched. This is not possible, Maggie said, her mind racing. I did not do this. Someone must have used your login? Genevieve's voice dripped with false sympathy. How convenient. How very, very convenient. Maggie looked at the documents again, really looked this time, and her blood ran cold. The timestamps. Several of the transactions were dated on days when she had been somewhere else entirely. The amounts were wrong, inconsistent with how the household accounts actually worked. The receiving accounts were listed as unknown, but she could see from the routing numbers that they were domestic, probably local. This was a frame job. A clumsy, obvious frame job. But who would believe her? She was the outsider, the interloper, the gold digger who had married above her station. Her word against the Harrison family's documented evidence. Unless someone had used her credentials on purpose. Unless someone had been planning this for months. Unless Nate... I did not take any money, Maggie said again, her voice harder this time. There must be a mistake. These timestamps do not even make sense. This transaction here, she pointed to a line on the second page, is dated October 3rd. I was at a doctor's appointment on October 3rd. My medical records will prove... Your medical records, Genevieve cut in, will prove nothing. We both know how easy it is to forge timestamps, to create alibis, to construct elaborate explanations for simple crimes. She reached into her clutch again and pulled out a check, already written, already signed. I am offering you $50,000, Margaret. Consider it severance, a settlement, enough to start over somewhere far from here. Maggie stared at the check. $50,000. To the Harrisons, it was pocket change. To the woman they thought she was, it should have been a fortune. But Maggie was not the woman they thought she was. You will take this money, Genevieve continued, her voice hardening. You will leave tonight, quietly, without a scene. You will file for divorce by the end of the week. We will not press criminal charges. This, she gestured at the folder, will disappear. You will disappear. And my family can finally begin to heal from your unfortunate presence. Maggie looked at the check. She looked at Genevieve's triumphant, hateful face. She thought about her secret accounts, her hidden business, the $47 million that proved she was more than anyone in this family had ever imagined. She could reveal it all right now. She could pull out her phone and show Genevieve the balance statements, the client lists, the proof that Margaret Cole Harrison was not a gold digger, but a self-made millionaire who had never needed the Harrison money at all. But something stopped her. Some instinct, honed by years of survival. They were setting a trap. They wanted her to react, to fight, to do something that would justify whatever they were planning next. And revealing her business now, before she understood the full scope of their attack, would only give them another weapon to use against her. "I am not taking your money," Maggie said slowly, "and I am not leaving my husband." Genevieve's expression flickered, surprise breaking through the mask for just a moment before the ice reassembled. "I am not asking." Before Maggie could respond, the terrace door opened and Chloe appeared, her phone in hand, her eyes bright with malicious excitement. "Mother, everyone is waiting. It is time." Genevieve smiled, the expression of a woman who held all the cards and knew it. Perfect timing. She turned back to Maggie. "You should come inside, Margaret. You will not want to miss this." The walk back through the ballroom felt like a march to an execution. Maggie scanned the crowd desperately, searching for Nate, hoping against hope that he would see her, would sense something was wrong, would for once in their marriage choose her over his family. She found him near the stage, standing beside Victoria Pemberton, their shoulders almost touching. As Maggie watched, Victoria whispered something in his ear, and he smiled. Their eyes met across the room, Maggie and her husband. She tried to communicate something, anything, a plea for help, a warning of what was coming. He looked away. Genevieve climbed the 3 steps to the small stage, took the microphone from the band leader and tapped it twice. The feedback whined through the speakers, silencing the crowd with the efficiency of a guillotine. "Good evening, everyone," Genevieve said, her voice warm and gracious, the voice of a beloved hostess, a pillar of the community, a woman who had never done anything wrong in her entire perfect life. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate the Harrison Family Foundation and our continued commitment to uplifting those less fortunate." Scattered applause rippled through the crowd. Before we continue with tonight's program, I want to address something personal. Genevieve's gaze found Maggie in the crowd, pinning her in place like a butterfly to a board. "As many of you know, my son Nathaniel married a young woman some years ago. A woman from—" She paused, letting the silence stretch. Difficult circumstances. The murmuring began, heads turned. 200 pairs of eyes found Maggie, assessed her, cataloged her, dismissed her. "We welcomed Margaret into our family with open hearts," Genevieve continued, her voice heavy with false sympathy. "We hope to help her rise above her background, to give her opportunities she could never have achieved on her own. We treated her as one of us." Another pause, another wave of whispers. "Sadly, we have recently discovered that our generosity was misplaced. No. No, no, no. This was not happening. This could not be happening. Our family accountant has uncovered evidence that Margaret has been stealing from our household accounts. Thousands of dollars over the past year, siphoned away through elaborate schemes designed to evade detection." The gasps were audible now. Maggie could see Chloe at the edge of the crowd, phone raised, filming everything. She could see Arthur Harrison shaking his head in profound disappointment. She could see the senator and the banker and all the other important people recalculating their relationship to the Harrison family, measuring the scandal against the social capital of staying close. "We have documentation," Genevieve said. "We have proof. We have tried to handle this privately, for Nathaniel's sake. But the time for privacy has passed." She gestured, and Nate stepped forward. He looked serious. He looked sad. He looked like a man whose heart was breaking, and Maggie realized with a sickening lurch that he had practiced this. He had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror, perfecting the expression of wounded betrayal. "I did not want to believe it," Nate said, his voice carrying through the microphone Chloe had handed him. "Maggie, I defended you. I trusted you. I thought I knew who you were. He shook his head, the picture of devastated innocence. How could you do this to our family? Nate. Maggie's voice came out as a croak. I did not. You know I did not. The evidence is clear, Genevieve cut in smoothly. However, because we are a family that believes in mercy, we will not be pressing criminal charges. She reached into her clutch and pulled out the check, holding it high for everyone to see. We are offering Margaret $100,000, enough to start a new life. We only ask that she leave quietly and grant my son the divorce he deserves. The room was spinning. Maggie could feel the weight of 200 judgments pressing down on her, could see the narrative forming in real time. The gold digger caught, the noble family wronged, the magnanimous offer of mercy to someone who did not deserve it. I did not steal anything. Maggie's voice was louder now, cutting through the whispers. This is a lie. Check the timestamps on those transactions. Check the IP addresses. I was not even... And then Victoria Pemberton stepped forward. She emerged from beside Nate with the timing of a Broadway star hitting her mark, her hand resting on her stomach, her eyes glistening with perfectly timed tears. It is okay, Nate, Victoria said, her voice soft and trembling. We will get through this together. You do not need her anymore. She looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the recording phones. You have me, she said. You have us. The implication landed like a bomb. Nate's mistress. Nate's pregnant mistress. Standing beside him in public, on stage, in front of 200 witnesses, while his wife was accused of theft and offered a check to disappear. Maggie understood then, with brutal, devastating clarity, what this was. Not just a humiliation, not just a divorce. This was a complete and total annihilation. They had manufactured evidence to make her a criminal. They had paraded Nate's affair in public to make her a victim of her own inadequacy. They had offered her money to make themselves look generous and her look guilty. And they had done it all in front of everyone who mattered in Boston. By morning, the story would be everywhere. By next week, she would not be able to show her face anywhere in the city. By next month, the Harrisons would have rewritten history so thoroughly that no one would remember she had ever been anything but exactly what they claimed. A gold digger, a thief, a cautionary tale. Genevieve extended the check toward her, triumph barely concealed beneath false sympathy. Take it, Margaret. Walk away. While you still can. Maggie looked at the check. She looked at her husband, who would not meet her eyes. She looked at Victoria, whose tears had somehow managed not to smudge her perfect mascara. She looked at 200 faces waiting for her to crumble, to cry, to prove every terrible thing they had assumed about her. And something in Maggie? Something that had been sleeping for 5 years. Something forged in 18 years of foster care and 20 years of fighting for survival, finally woke up. She was not going to give them the satisfaction. She opened her mouth to speak, to say something, anything that would shatter the narrative they had constructed. But before she could, she felt hands on her arms. Hotel security. 2 men in dark suits with earpieces and neutral expressions, appearing at her sides with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed drill. Ma'am? One of them said quietly, we need you to come with us. I have not done anything wrong. There has been a report filed with the Boston Police Department. We need to escort you from the premises while they sort this out. The police. Maggie looked at Genevieve, who had resumed her expression of sorrowful sympathy and understood. This was not just a public humiliation. They were having her arrested. They had manufactured evidence, created a paper trail, and called the police in advance. The timing was too perfect. The security response was too fast. Everything had been choreographed down to the last detail. Nate. Maggie made one final appeal, her voice cracking. Look at me. You know I did not do this. You know, but Nate was already turning away, Victoria's hand in his, walking toward his mother's approving smile. The security guards led Maggie through the ballroom. She kept her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break, but she could hear the whispers, the camera phones clicking, the narrative being constructed in real time. The guards took her through the service corridors, past the kitchen staff who pretended not to notice, past the loading dock where deliveries came in, and finally to the hotel's service entrance where two Boston police officers waited beside a cruiser with its lights off. Margaret Harrison? One of the officers asked. He was young, uncomfortable, like a man who knew something was wrong but had no authority to stop it. Yes. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The rest of the Miranda warning blurred together. Maggie felt the cold metal of handcuffs close around her wrists. She felt herself being guided into the back seat of the police car. She felt the last fragments of her carefully constructed life crumbling into dust around her. Through their window, as the car pulled away, she watched the Boston Harbor Hotel grow smaller, its lights glittering with false promise. Somewhere inside, 200 people were returning to their champagne and their gossip, secure in the knowledge that justice had been done. Somewhere inside, the Harrison family was celebrating, and Margaret Cole Harrison, sitting in the back of a police car, in a ridiculous pink dress, with her hands cuffed behind her back, began to plan. The holding cell at the downtown Boston precinct smelled like disinfectant and despair. Maggie sat on the metal bench, her back against the cold concrete wall, counting the cracks in the ceiling to keep her mind from spiraling. The pink dress was wrinkled beyond repair. Her hair had come loose from its severe style, hanging in limp strands around her face. Helen's pearl bracelet pressed against her wrist, the only comfort in this fluorescent hell. She had been in worse places. That was what she kept telling herself. The group home in Tulsa, where 8 girls shared one bathroom and the locks did not work. The emergency shelter in Oklahoma City, where she had slept with her shoes on, because anything left unattended disappeared by morning. The back seat of her first car, a rusted Toyota Corolla she had bought for $600, which had been her home for 3 months after she aged out of the foster care system at 18. This was bad, but she had survived bad before. She would survive this too. The night crawled past in increments of fluorescent light and distant sounds, voices from other cells, angry or pleading or resigned. The occasional slam of a heavy door, the murmur of officers changing shifts, discussing football scores and weekend plans, as if the world were normal, as if lives were not being destroyed in the cages around them. Maggie dozed fitfully on the metal bench, waking each time with the sharp disorientation of someone who had forgotten where she was, followed immediately by the crushing weight of remembering. At some point in the early hours, a female officer appeared at her cell, middle-aged, tired, with the weathered face of someone who had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. "Harrison," she said, "you made bail." Maggie stood on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She followed the officer through processing, signed papers she barely read, collected her belongings, a clutch purse containing a phone with a cracked screen and $73 in cash, and emerged into the gray October morning. Ruth was waiting on the sidewalk. Her business partner looked like she had not slept. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and she wore yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, as if she had jumped out of bed and come straight here. She was holding 2 cups of coffee, like weapons. "You look terrible," Ruth said. You should see the other guy. Ruth did not laugh. She pulled Maggie into a fierce hug, and for a moment, just a moment, Maggie let herself be held. Come on, Ruth said, pulling back. Car is this way. We have a lot to talk about. They drove through the waking city in Ruth's sensible Honda, which smelled faintly of the lavender air freshener her late husband had liked. Maggie wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into her bones. Tell me everything, Ruth said. So Maggie did. The confrontation with Genevieve on the terrace, the public accusation, Victoria's pregnancy announcement, Nate's betrayal, the arrest, all of it. Spilling out in a monotone that she barely recognized as her own voice. When she finished, Ruth was silent for a long moment. I got the bail lowered, she finally said. Found a public defender named James Wheeler. He is young, but he is smart, and he is already suspicious about the evidence. The timestamps do not match, Maggie. I pulled what I could before they froze our access, and at least 3 of those transactions happened when you were verifiably somewhere else. So the case will be dismissed. Eventually. Probably. But that is not the real problem. Ruth pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building and killed the engine. She turned to face Maggie. I checked our accounts this morning. ClearPath. Your personal holdings. Everything. And? Frozen. All of it. Somebody filed a fraud report claiming that your entire business is a vehicle for money laundering. They connected it to the Harrison embezzlement charges, claimed the stolen money was being funneled through ClearPath to hide the trail. That is insane. The business is completely legitimate. I have 5 years of audited financials. I know. And we will prove it. But right now, as of this morning, you have nothing. No access to any of your accounts. No way to pay lawyers or investigators or anyone else who could help you fight this. The words hit like physical blows. $47 million. 5 years of work. Gone. How is this possible? Maggie asked, her voice barely audible. How did they even know about the business? I was so careful. Ruth hesitated. I have a theory, but you are not going to like it. Tell me. The fraud report includes details that only someone with inside access could know. Account numbers, routing information, the structure of your holding companies. Ruth met her eyes. I think Nate found your hidden phone, Miha. Months ago, maybe longer. I think he has been planning this for a very long time. Maggie closed her eyes. The trip to the Bahamas, the one Nate had taken in February, supposedly for a work conference. She remembered now. She had noticed her phone in a slightly different position when she retrieved it after he returned. She had dismissed it as paranoia. She had been right. She just had not been paranoid enough. So I have nothing, Maggie said. You have me. Ruth reached across and took her hand. You have your brain, and you have something the Harrisons do not have. What is that? Nothing left to lose. Ruth's apartment was small and cluttered and unbearably warm. Plants filled every windowsill, some thriving, and some optimistic casualties of neglect. The walls were covered with photographs of Ruth's late husband, her extensive network of nieces and nephews, her travels through Mexico and South America, in the years before she settled into the quiet life of a retired accountant. The whole place smelled like coffee and cumin, and the particular warmth of a home that was genuinely lived in. Shower, Ruth commanded, pointing Maggie toward the bathroom. I will find you some clothes. Then we eat. Then we plan. The hot water felt like absolution. Maggie stood under the spray until her skin was red, watching the remnants of her old life swirl down the drain. The makeup Chloe had insisted on, the hairspray that had held her prison style in place, the last traces of the woman she had pretended to be for 5 years. When she emerged, wrapped in a borrowed robe, that smelled like Ruth's fabric softener. She found her business partner at the kitchen table with 2 legal pads, a laptop, and the expression of a woman preparing for war. "Okay," Ruth said. "Let us figure out what we are dealing with. First, the criminal case. James Wheeler thinks we can beat it. The evidence is sloppy, clearly fabricated. Any competent forensic accountant will tear it apart in an hour. But that takes time, and in the meantime, your name is destroyed. And the business? Frozen, indefinitely. The fraud report was filed using information that could only have come from you, which means someone with access to your credentials authorized it. Probably Nate, using your hidden phone. It is going to take months to unravel, maybe longer. Even if we prove everything is legitimate, the reputational damage might be permanent." Maggie absorbed this. Months, years maybe. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for, trapped behind a wall of bureaucratic suspicion. "The business can survive," Ruth continued. "It is solid. The clients are loyal. We just need to keep it running while we fight this. I can manage the day-to-day, keep the lights on, but I cannot access the accounts. Everything is frozen. So, what do we do?" Ruth pushed one of the legal pads toward her. "We start with what we have. You spent 5 years watching the Harrisons, observing them, learning their secrets. Everything you know, every overheard conversation, every suspicious behavior, write it down. We are going to build a case against them the same way they tried to build a case against you. Except ours is going to be true." Maggie looked at the blank page. 5 years of humiliation. 5 years of being treated like dirt. 5 years of watching and waiting and pretending not to notice. She picked up a pen and started writing. They worked through the morning, through the afternoon, through the evening. Ruth ordered takeout that went cold on the counter. The coffee pot emptied and was refilled 3 times. The legal pads filled with names and dates and details that Maggie had stored away without even realizing she was doing it. Arthur Harrison's investment fund had been underperforming for years. Maggie had overheard him on the phone once, voice tight, with controlled panic, talking about liquidity problems. The Harrison Foundation's charitable giving numbers never seemed to match the press releases. Maggie had looked at their public filings once out of curiosity, and the math had not added up. Genevieve had a secret, something from before her marriage. Maggie had caught fragments of a conversation once, something about making sure the Scranton records never surfaced. Victoria Pemberton had been engaged before, to a man from Connecticut whose family had money. The engagement had ended suddenly, without explanation. It was not enough. Not yet. But it was a start. Just after midnight, Maggie's phone buzzed. Not her secret phone, which was still hidden in the bathroom at the Wellesley house, but the cracked, neglected phone the Harrisons knew about. A text from an unknown number. "You should have taken the check. Now it gets worse." Maggie showed it to Ruth. Ruth studied the message for a long moment. Then she looked up at Maggie with fire in her eyes. "They want you scared," she said. "They want you to run. That means they are not finished. What do you think they are planning?" "I do not know, but I know someone who can find out." "Who?" "My nephew, Darnell. He used to be a police detective before he started his own investigation firm. He is very good at finding things people want to stay hidden." "Can we afford him? We cannot access any money." Ruth smiled. "He is family, mija. Family does not charge. Besides, he hates rich people who think they are above the law. This will be a personal pleasure for him." Maggie looked at the legal pads, at the laptop, at the half-eaten containers of cold Chinese food. She thought about everything she had lost in the past 24 hours. Her reputation, her marriage, her freedom, her money. And yet, somehow, she did not feel defeated. She felt angry. "Call him," she said. "Let us find out what the Harrisons are really hiding." Darnell Washington arrived at Ruth's apartment the next morning with a box of donuts and the calm, assessing manner of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and kind eyes that missed nothing. His handshake was firm, his voice was deep, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how good he was at his job. "Aunt Ruth told me everything," he said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. He opened the donut box and gestured for Maggie to take one. "You have had a rough couple of days. That is one way to put it. Tell me about the Harrisons. Start from the beginning." "Do not leave anything out," so Maggie told him. She started with meeting Nate at the coffee shop in Cambridge, the whirlwind courtship, the quick wedding that his family had opposed from the start. She described 5 years of subtle humiliations, of being made to feel less than, of watching her husband slowly transform from the kind man she thought she married into a stranger who would not meet her eyes. She told him about her business, about the careful walls she had built between her secret life and her visible one. She told him about Ruth's warnings, about the investigation into her finances, about the gala and the accusation and the arrest. Darnell listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small leather journal. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "This is one of the sloppiest frame jobs I have ever seen," he finally said. "The timestamps alone should have gotten this thrown out before it ever became an arrest warrant. Either the Harrisons have judges in their pocket, or somebody rushed this through before anyone could look too closely." "What does that mean?" "It means they are scared." Darnell leaned forward, his eyes intense. "People who feel secure do not rush. They do not make mistakes. The fact that this was so sloppy tells me they needed you gone fast. The question is why?" "Maybe because of Victoria," Ruth suggested. "The pregnancy announcement. If Nate is planning to replace his wife with his mistress, he needs the old wife discredited first." "That is part of it," Darnell agreed. "But $50,000 to make you disappear? 100,000 after you refused? That is nothing to a family like the Harrisons. If all they wanted was to get rid of you, they would have offered more, made it worth your while." He flipped back through his notes. "You said Arthur Harrison has been having liquidity problems with his fund. You said the foundation's numbers do not add up. You said there is a secret in Genevieve's past." "Yes. And now they are trying to make you look like a thief and a fraud, trying to connect your legitimate business to their manufactured embezzlement charges." "Yes." Darnell set down his pen. "Mrs. Harrison, I think the Harrisons are in serious financial trouble. I think they have been hiding it for years, maybe longer. And I think you, accidentally, might have become a threat to that secret. How? I did not know anything about their finances. You did not need to. You married into the family. You had access to the household accounts. If anyone ever looked closely at those accounts, at where the money was really going, they might see things the Harrisons do not want seen." Maggie thought about the bank statements Genevieve had shown her, the transactions attributed to her login. "Money disappearing into accounts we cannot identify," Genevieve had said. But Maggie had not made those withdrawals, which meant someone else had, using her credentials. "You think they have been embezzling," Maggie said slowly, "and they used my login to cover their tracks. I think it is possible, more than possible, and when they decided to get rid of you, they realized they could use their own crime to frame you for it." "That is insane." "That is desperation," Darnell corrected. "People do crazy things when they are desperate, and if the Harrisons are about to lose everything, they would do anything to find a scapegoat." He stood, tucking his notebook into his jacket pocket. "Give me a week. I am going to dig into everything. The Foundation's finances, Arthur's fund, Genevieve's past, Victoria Pemberton's history. By the time I am done, we will know exactly what they are hiding." "And then what?" Then we decide how to use it. The week that followed was the longest of Maggie's life. She could not leave Ruth's apartment, not without risking being photographed by the reporters who had gotten wind of the story. She could not access her money, could not contact her employees, could not do anything but wait. James Wheeler, the public defender, came by twice to update her on the criminal case. He was young, barely 30, with rumpled suits and an earnest intensity that reminded Maggie of herself at that age. The evidence is garbage, James said during his second visit, spreading documents across Ruth's kitchen table. Half of these transactions have timestamps from when you were verifiably somewhere else. Your medical records, your credit card receipts, the GPS data from your phone, they all show you could not have made these withdrawals. So the case will be dismissed? Eventually. But Maggie, you need to understand something. The Harrisons have good lawyers, expensive lawyers. They are going to fight every motion, delay every hearing, drag this out as long as possible. Even if we win, it could take months, years. Why? If they know they are going to lose, because the longer this goes on, the more your reputation suffers. By the time you are cleared, the story will be old news. Nobody will care about the exoneration. They will only remember the accusation. It was, Maggie realized, exactly the point. The Harrisons did not need to convict her. They just needed to destroy her. And they were succeeding. The news coverage was relentless. Every day brought new stories, new angles, new reasons for strangers to hate her. Margaret Harrison, the gold digger who stole from the family that welcomed her. Margaret Harrison, the ungrateful wife who repaid kindness with theft. Margaret Harrison, whose own husband had to stand before Boston society and reveal her crimes. The narrative was set. The verdict was already rendered. All that remained was the paperwork. On the seventh day, Darnell returned. He came in the evening, after dark, checking over his shoulder as he climbed the stairs to Ruth's apartment. When Ruth opened the door, his face was grim. "We need to talk," he said. They sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Maggie had poured out her life story a week ago. Darnell opened his briefcase and began pulling out folders, photographs, documents that spread across the surface, like evidence at a trial. "I found it," he said. "Everything. And it is worse than I thought." He started with the Harrison Foundation. They have been embezzling from their own charity for at least 5 years. Darnell spread out financial documents, highlighted and annotated. Millions of dollars that were supposed to go to scholarships and community programs, siphoned off into private accounts. They disguised it as administrative expenses, consulting fees, operational costs. But when you look at where the money actually went, it traces back to Arthur Harrison's personal investment fund. The fund that has been underperforming, Maggie said. The fund that was about to collapse. Darnell pulled out another folder. Arthur Harrison made a series of bad investments about 6 years ago. Tech startups that failed. A real estate deal that went south. He lost nearly everything. The only thing keeping the family afloat has been the foundation money. "That is fraud," Ruth said. "That is federal fraud," Darnell agreed. "Mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion. If this came out, Arthur Harrison would go to prison." He pulled out more documents. "But that is not all. You mentioned Genevieve has a secret. Something about Scranton." Darnell smiled grimly. "Her maiden name is Miller. Genevieve Miller, born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Her father was a factory worker. Her mother cleaned houses. She grew up poor, Maggie, as poor as you." Maggie stared at him. "That is impossible. She is always talking about her family's legacy. The Newport Summers, the trust funds, all lies. She met Arthur Harrison at a society event when she was 22. She had managed to talk her way in somehow, and she caught his eye. They married within 6 months. By then, she had invented an entire family history. The Millers of Scranton became the Millers of Newport. The factory worker father became a shipping magnate. The cleaning woman mother became a philanthropist. She has been lying about who she is for 40 years, and she will do anything to protect that lie. That is why she hates you so much, Maggie. You remind her of what she used to be. The irony was almost too much to process. Genevieve Harrison, who had spent 5 years making Maggie feel worthless for her background, came from the same background herself. And then there is Victoria, Darnell continued. He pulled out a final folder, thicker than the others. Victoria Pemberton is not who she claims to be either. What do you mean? Before Nate, she was engaged to a man named David Chin, old money family from Connecticut. The engagement ended suddenly about 18 months ago. No public explanation. But I talked to a former employee of the Chen family, and she told me what really happened. He opened the folder, revealing photographs, bank records, legal documents. Victoria claimed she was pregnant. She used that pregnancy to pressure David into proposing, into giving her access to his finances, into planning a wedding that would have made her part of his family forever. But then David got suspicious. He hired a private investigator, and he discovered that the pregnancy was fake. Fake? There was no baby. Victoria had been lying the entire time. The Chen family paid her a significant settlement to go away quietly and never contact David again. Ruth leaned forward. You think she is doing the same thing to Nate? I think it is more than possible. The timing of her pregnancy announcement, the way she appeared at the gala as if on cue, the whole thing feels choreographed. Darnell looked at Maggie. And there is one more thing. Victoria has a sister, Rebecca Vance. She is a lawyer, specializes in family law and settlements. I found evidence that she was involved in at least 2 other cases where wealthy men were targeted by women claiming false pregnancies. You think they are running a con? I think they have been running a con for years. And I think the Harrisons, in their desperation to get rid of you and clean up Nate's mess, have allied themselves with someone who is playing a longer game than they realize. Maggie looked at the evidence spread across the table. Foundation fraud, identity lies, pregnancy scams, the complete destruction of the family that had tried to destroy her, packaged neatly in manila folders. What do I do with this? She asked. That, Darnell said, is up to you. But Maggie, if you go public with this, you will not just hurt the Harrisons. You will destroy them. Genevieve, Arthur, Chloe, and probably Victoria, and whoever that baby belongs to, if there even is a baby. This is nuclear option territory. There is no going back. Maggie closed her eyes. She thought about 5 years of cruelty. She thought about the gala, the accusation, the handcuffs cold around her wrists. She thought about her business frozen, her reputation destroyed, her future in ruins. And she thought about Janine, her foster mother, the woman who had taught her that survival was not the same as revenge. I need to think, Maggie said. I need time. You do not have much time, Darnell warned. The Harrisons are not going to stop. They are going to keep coming until they have finished what they started. I know. But if I become like them, if I use their tactics, if I destroy without caring who gets caught in the crossfire, then I become exactly what they said I was, and I am not that person. She gathered the folders and stood. I am not going to make this decision tonight, but I will make it. And when I do, it will be the right one. For me, not for revenge. Darnell nodded slowly. You are stronger than they think you are. I know. Maggie smiled, the first real smile she had managed since the gala. That is why they are going to lose. 3 weeks after the gala, the criminal case against Maggie collapsed. It happened in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and floor wax. Before a judge named Caroline Morrison, who had spent 30 years developing a very low tolerance for wasted time. James Wheeler presented his evidence methodically, systematically destroying every piece of documentation the prosecution had submitted, bank records with impossible timestamps, transaction logs that contradicted basic geography, a supposed confession email sent from an IP address that traced to a hotel in the Bahamas when Maggie was verifiably attending a doctor's appointment in Boston. Judge Morrison listened with growing irritation, her pen tapping against her desk with increasing force. "Mr. Prosecutor," she finally interrupted, "is this the best evidence the state has?" The assistant district attorney, a young woman who had clearly been handed a case no one else wanted, looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. "Your Honor, we were given these materials by the complainant's legal representatives. We had no reason to believe." "You had no reason to verify?" Judge Morrison's voice could have frozen lava. "You had no reason to confirm that evidence in a criminal case was actually legitimate before presenting it in my courtroom?" The prosecutor had no answer. "This case is dismissed," Judge Morrison declared. "Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the State Attorney General's office for investigation into potential prosecutorial misconduct and the filing of false evidence." She looked at Maggie, her expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Harrison, I apologize on behalf of this court. You should never have been arrested. You should never have spent a night in a holding cell. Someone manufactured evidence against you, and that someone should face consequences. I hope you will consider consulting with an attorney about your options." "Thank you, Your Honor," Maggie managed to say. Outside the courthouse, Ruth was waiting with coffee and the first genuine smile Maggie had seen from her in weeks. "We did it," James Wheeler said, shaking Maggie's hand. "You are free. The charges are dismissed." But even as Maggie accepted the congratulations, even as she let herself feel a, a moment of relief, something nagged at the back of her mind. It was too easy. The Harrisons had resources, connections, the best lawyers money could buy. Why had they presented such sloppy evidence? Why had they made it so easy to debunk? Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Harrison family releases statement on dismissed case. Maggie opened the link with fingers that had gone cold. "The Harrison family is disappointed by today's ruling," the statement read. "While we respect the court's decision, we remain convinced of the validity of our concerns and will be pursuing the matter through civil channels. Our hearts go out to our son Nathaniel, who continues to struggle with the betrayal of trust that led to this unfortunate situation. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. They were not done. The criminal case was just the opening salvo. Now came the civil war." Ruth read the statement over her shoulder. "This is not over. No, it is not." That night, Victoria Pemberton gave an interview. Maggie watched it at Ruth's apartment, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold long ago. Victoria sat in a soft-lit living room that Maggie recognized as the Harrison townhouse in Back Bay. She wore a flowing white dress that emphasized her pregnancy, and her hair was arranged in soft waves that framed her face with careful vulnerability. "I did not want any of this," Victoria said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Nate and I reconnected after his marriage had already fallen apart. We did not plan for this." She gestured to her stomach. "But this baby is a blessing, and I just want to protect my family." The interviewer, a woman with perfect hair and practiced sympathy, leaned forward with grave concern. "There have been reports that the first Mrs. Harrison has made threats against you. Can you speak to that?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Perfect, crystalline tears that somehow did not smudge her mascara. "She has called me multiple times, saying terrible things, threatening things." She paused to dab at her eyes with a tissue. "I was so frightened that I filed a police report. I do not know what she is capable of. I just want my baby to be safe." Maggie stared at the screen. She had never called Victoria. She did not even have her number. The accusation was completely fabricated, just like the embezzlement evidence. "Doesn't." just like everything else. But it did not matter. The narrative was set. The sympathetic mistress protecting her unborn child, the unhinged ex-wife driven to threats and violence, the noble Harrison family victimized again. They are building towards something, Ruth said quietly. This interview, the civil suit, they are creating a paper trail. For what? Ruth looked at her with troubled eyes. I do not know, but whatever it is, we need to be ready. The next 2 weeks proved Ruth right. The civil lawsuit arrived first, a thick packet of documents that accused Maggie of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and half a dozen other charges. The Harrisons were seeking $20 million in damages, plus full ownership of ClearPath Advisory, which they claimed had been built with money stolen from their family. Then came the restraining order. Victoria Pemberton, citing the phone calls that had never happened and threats that existed only in her imagination, secured a court order barring Maggie from coming within 500 feet of her, Nate, or any Harrison family property. Then came the leak. Someone, almost certainly Chloe's social media team, released photographs of Maggie being arrested at the gala. Not the dignified walk through the lobby that she remembered, but a carefully selected series of images that made her look crazed, disheveled, dangerous. The photos were picked up by tabloid websites and spread across social media with comments that ranged from mocking to hateful. And then came the interview. Not Victoria this time, someone claiming to be Maggie. Maggie found out about it the way she found out about most things now, through a text from Ruth. Turn on Channel 7 right now. The woman on screen was about Maggie's height and build, with similar coloring, but that was where the resemblance ended. She was an actress, Maggie would later learn, hired through an agency that specialized in corporate videos and did not ask too many questions. But the audience did not know that. They saw a woman who claimed to be Margaret Cole Harrison, giving a tearful interview about her regrets. I was jealous, the fake Maggie said, her voice catching on cue. I saw what the Harrisons had, and I wanted it. I thought if I could just get close enough, I could take some of it for myself. She paused to wipe away a tear. I am not proud of what I did. I know I hurt people. I know I betrayed their trust. But I want everyone to know that I am sorry. I am so, so sorry. Maggie watched her own fabricated confession with a numbness that had moved beyond shock into something that felt almost like calm. This is impossible, Ruth said, pacing behind the couch. This is illegal. We can prove this woman is not you. We can prove she was hired. We can prove it eventually. Maggie's voice was flat. But by then, everyone will have already seen this. Everyone will already believe it. So what do we do? Maggie turned off the television. She looked at the stack of evidence Darnell had gathered, still sitting on Ruth's dining table. Foundation fraud, identity lies, pregnancy scams, nuclear weapons waiting to be deployed. I tried to do this the right way, she said slowly. I tried to let the system work. I tried to wait for justice. And justice is not coming. They have too much money, too many connections, too much willingness to lie and cheat and destroy. They are never going to stop, Ruth. They are going to keep coming until there is nothing left of me. She stood and walked to the table. She picked up the folders, one by one. So I am done waiting. I am done hoping someone else will fix this. I am done being the victim. What are you going to do? Maggie looked at her business partner, her friend, the woman who had believed in her when no one else would. I am going to fight back, and I am going to win. Elena Santos was not easy to find. The investigative journalist had spent 3 years documenting charity fraud in the Boston nonprofit sector, making powerful enemies at every turn. She had been sued, threatened, and blackballed from mainstream media outlets, which was why she now operated independently, publishing her investigations on a subscription-based platform that had built a loyal following of people who valued truth over access. Darnell found her through a contact at the Boston Globe, a senior editor who had wanted to hire Elena years ago, but had been overruled by a publisher with too many society connections. She is the best, Darnell told Maggie. She is also careful. She does not publish anything she cannot prove 6 ways from Sunday. If she takes your story, she will not rest until she has verified every detail. How do I reach her? You do not. She reaches you. I passed along your information. If she is interested, she will make contact. 3 days later, Maggie received a text from an unknown number. Coffee. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. Blue Moon Cafe, Somerville. Come alone. The Blue Moon Cafe was a cramped, cluttered space filled with mismatched furniture and the smell of burnt espresso. Elena Santos was already there when Maggie arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop open in front of her and a look of assessment in her dark eyes. She was younger than Maggie had expected, maybe 35, with short black hair and the kind of face that could disappear into a crowd when needed. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, nothing memorable, nothing that would draw attention. Sit, Elena said, and do not look around. Just act like we are friends having coffee. Maggie sat. I know who you are, Elena continued, keeping her voice low. I know what happened at the gala. I know about the arrest, the charges, the dismissal. I have read the civil complaint. I have seen the fake interview. She paused, and I know that everything they are saying about you is a lie. How do you know that? Because I have been investigating the Harrison Foundation for 2 years. Elena's smile was thin and sharp. I knew there was fraud. I just could not prove it. They are good at covering their tracks. Their lawyers are better at threatening anyone who gets too close. She leaned forward. But you were inside. You had access. And now you have a reason to talk. Maggie hesitated. And if I do talk, what happens? I verify everything independently. I do not publish based on one source. I do not publish based on grudges. I publish based on evidence. If what you are telling me is true, if you have documentation, I will find a way to confirm it, and then I will destroy them. Why do you care? Elena's expression hardened. Because people like the Harrisons get away with everything. They steal from charities. They lie to the public. They destroy innocent people's lives. And they never face consequences because they have money and connections and lawyers. She paused. I became a journalist to hold people accountable. The Harrisons are long overdue. Maggie looked at this woman, this stranger who was offering her a weapon. She thought about everything she had learned from Darnell, the foundation fraud, the embezzlement, Genevieve's secret past, Victoria's history of pregnancy scams. She thought about the fake interview, her own face and voice being used to confess to crimes she had never committed. And she made her decision. I have evidence, Maggie said, detailed evidence, financial documents, testimony, everything you need to prove what the Harrisons have been doing. Elena's eyes sharpened. Where did you get it? A private investigator. Someone who knows how to dig. Can he testify? Can he provide chain of custody documentation? Yes. Everything is documented. Everything is provable. Elena was quiet for a moment, studying Maggie's face. Then she nodded. This is going to take time. I need to verify everything independently. I need to find additional sources. I need to make this bulletproof. How long? 6 weeks. Maybe 8. She held up a hand as Maggie started to protest. I know that feels like forever. I know they're going to keep attacking you. But if we rush this, if we publish before we are ready, they will find a way to discredit it. We need to be perfect. We need to be undeniable. And in the meantime, you stay quiet. You do not give interviews. You do not respond to accusations. You let them think they are winning. Maggie thought about 6 weeks of silence while the Harrisons continued their assault on her reputation. 6 weeks of being called a thief and a liar and a danger to society. 6 weeks of watching her life be destroyed while she did nothing. Then she thought about Janine, her foster mother. A woman without her own money is a woman without choices, Janine used to say. But she had also said something else, something Maggie had not thought about in years. Revenge is a meal that tastes better cold. Do not eat it while you are still angry. Wait until you can enjoy it. 6 weeks, Maggie said. I can wait 6 weeks. Good. Elena closed her laptop. I will be in touch. And Maggie, she added, as they both stood to leave, if the Harrisons knew what was coming for them, they would not be able to sleep at night. Take some comfort in that. The 6 weeks that followed were brutal. The civil lawsuit proceeded through preliminary hearings, each one generating new headlines, new attacks, new reasons for strangers to hate Margaret Cole Harrison. The restraining order was upheld. The frozen accounts stayed frozen. ClearPath Advisory, Maggie's $47 million creation, slowly began to bleed clients who did not want to be associated with a fraud investigation. But Maggie endured. She spent her days at Ruth's apartment, working on the documentation Elena needed. She gave James Wheeler everything he asked for to fight the civil case. She let Darnell continue his investigation, finding more evidence, more witnesses, more ammunition. And she waited. Helen visited every few days, bringing casseroles and wisdom and the particular comfort of someone who had seen worse and knew that survival was possible. I spent 30 years in family court, Helen said one afternoon, as they sat together on Ruth's small balcony, watching the autumn leaves fall. I saw families destroy each other over money, over pride, over nothing at all. And do you know what I learned? What? The ones who won were never the ones who fought the hardest. They were the ones who knew when to fight and when to wait. They were the ones who understood that patience is not weakness. It is strategy. I am tired of being patient, Maggie admitted. I am tired of watching them win. They have not won. They think they have won. That is not the same thing. Helen patted her hand. Your time is coming, Margaret. I promise you that. The call came exactly 6 weeks after the coffee shop meeting. It is done, Elena said. Everything is verified. Everything is documented. The story runs tomorrow. Tomorrow, there is a gala, the Harrison Foundation Winter Gala. I thought it would be poetic. Maggie felt something shift inside her, something that had been coiled tight for months, finally beginning to release. What happens now? Now, Elena said, you decide if you want to watch. The Harrison Family Foundation Winter Gala was meant to be a triumph. Genevieve had been planning it for months. A celebration of the family's resilience. A demonstration that the unpleasantness with the first Mrs. Harrison had been handled and could now be forgotten. 500 guests would fill the Four Seasons ballroom. The engagement of Chloe to Bradley Ashworth would be formally announced. The foundation's newest initiatives would be unveiled. The Harrison name would be restored to its proper place in Boston society. Maggie entered through the service entrance an hour before the event began. She was alone, dressed in the navy blue dress that Chloe had mocked months ago, Helen's pearls around her throat. She had a press credential that Elena had arranged, identifying her as an assistant for a Boston lifestyle publication that no one would think to question. She found a position near the back of the ballroom, partially hidden by a towering flower arrangement, invisible by design. The same position she had occupied at the gala where her life had been destroyed. The same position she had occupied for 5 years of her marriage. But she was not the same woman. Not anymore. The guests arrived in waves, glittering in their designer gowns and tailored suits, air-kissing and champagne-toasting, performing the rituals of wealth and privilege, with the ease of long practice. Maggie watched them with the detached assessment of a scientist observing a foreign species. She saw Genevieve Harrison, resplendent in silver and diamonds, holding court near the stage, with the confident grace of a woman who believed she had won. She saw Arthur Harrison, ruddy-faced from whiskey, laughing too loud at something a senator had said. She saw Chloe preening for photographs with Bradley Ashworth, practicing the smile she would deploy when their engagement was announced. And she saw Nate, her husband, her former husband, stood at the edge of the crowd with Victoria on his arm. He looked thinner than she remembered, his face drawn, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He was playing a role, Maggie realized, the same way she had played a role for 5 years, the same way they had all been playing roles. None of it was real. It never had been. At 8:45, Genevieve took the stage to begin the evening's program. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the microphone, her voice warm and gracious and completely false, "welcome to the Harrison Family Foundation Winter Gala. We are so grateful to have you here tonight, to celebrate our continued commitment to uplifting our community and supporting those in need." Applause rippled through the crowd. "This has been a challenging year for our family," Genevieve continued, her expression taking on a practiced sadness. "We have faced trials that tested our faith and our resilience. But we have emerged stronger, more united, more committed than ever to the values that have guided the Harrison family for generations." More applause, murmurs of approval. "Tonight I am proud to announce—" She stopped, frowned. Someone in the crowd had pulled out a phone, then another, then a dozen. A murmur rippled through the room, growing louder. Heads bent together, eyes widened. "What is happening?" Genevieve demanded, her composure cracking. "What is going on?" And then the giant screens behind the stage, which had been displaying the Harrison Foundation logo, flickered and changed. Elena Santos appeared on screen. "Good evening," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I am Elena Santos, investigative journalist. For the past 2 months, I have been investigating the Harrison Family Foundation. What I have discovered is a pattern of fraud, embezzlement, and cover-up spanning more than a decade." The ballroom erupted. Genevieve lunged toward the AV booth, screaming for someone to turn it off, but it was too late. The broadcast was streaming live on Elena's platform. Every major news outlet had been alerted. Within minutes, it would be everywhere. The Harrison Foundation has diverted more than $12 million from charitable donations into private accounts, Elena continued on screen. Documents flashed behind her, highlighted and annotated, the meticulous evidence of years of theft. "We have obtained bank records, internal communications, and testimony from former employees documenting systematic fraud." In the ballroom, Arthur Harrison had gone white. He grabbed the back of a chair for support, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. "But the financial fraud is only part of the story," Elena said. "The Harrison family has also engaged in a coordinated campaign to destroy the reputation of Nathaniel Harrison's first wife, Margaret Cole Harrison." The screenshots appeared. The manufactured bank records with their impossible timestamps, the communications about creating evidence, the invoice from the talent agency that had hired the actress to give the fake interview. Everything Darnell had found, verified and documented, and now displayed for the world to see. Genevieve Harrison was screaming now, actually screaming, clawing at the technicians who could not or would not turn off the screens. Chloe was sobbing in Bradley's arms, mascara running down her face. Arthur had collapsed into a chair, his hand pressed to his chest, Perhaps most shocking, Elena continued, is the truth about Genevieve Harrison herself. A photograph appeared on screen. Young, black and white, showing a teenage girl in front of a modest house with a factory visible in the background. Genevieve Miller was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Her father was a factory worker. Her mother was a cleaning woman. She reinvented herself when she married Arthur Harrison in 1985, creating a false family history that she has maintained for 40 years. The gasps in the ballroom were audible, even over Genevieve's screaming. This was not just fraud. This was social annihilation. Everything Genevieve had built, everything she had pretended to be, exposed as a lie. Finally, Elena said, "There is the matter of Victoria Pemberton." Victoria, who had been standing frozen beside Nate, made a sound like a wounded animal. "Our investigation has revealed that Miss Pemberton has a history of targeting wealthy men with false pregnancy claims. We have documented at least 4 previous incidents, including a pattern of behavior involving her sister, attorney Rebecca Vance." Photos appeared, court records, settlement documents, the complete dossier on Victoria's history of fraud, DNA testing of any children resulting from Ms. Pemberton's relationship with Nathaniel Harrison is strongly recommended, Elena concluded. This investigation is ongoing. Federal authorities have been notified. The screen went dark. For a moment, the ballroom was completely silent. 500 people stood frozen, processing the destruction of everything they had believed about the family that had invited them here tonight. Then the chaos began. People ran for the exits, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Reporters appeared from nowhere, cameras flashing, microphones extended toward anyone who would talk. Arthur Harrison was on the floor, paramedics rushing toward him. Chloe was being dragged away by a furious Bradley Ashworth Sr., their engagement obviously over before it had been announced. And in the center of it all, Nate stood alone. Victoria had fled the moment her face appeared on screen. The Harrisons were occupied with their various collapses. The guests, who had been so eager to celebrate with him, were now refusing to meet his eyes. He turned slowly, scanning the crowd with the desperate expression of a drowning man searching for a lifeline. And he found Maggie. Their eyes met across the ruined ballroom. He looked at her, really looked, and she watched the understanding dawn on his face. She had done this. She had brought down everything. Maggie walked toward him, moving through the chaos with the calm of someone who had already survived the worst and knew that nothing could touch her now. She stopped in front of him. "You said I was not good enough," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying in the sudden hush around them. "You said I was an embarrassment. You stood on a stage and called me a thief while you were sleeping with another woman and your family was embezzling from children's charities. Maggie." She held up a hand. "I built a $47 million company while you thought I was watching television. I employed 93 people. I helped hundreds of small business owners manage their finances. And the whole time, you and your family treated me like I was worthless." She looked around the ballroom, at the ruins of the Harrison Empire. "This is what worthless looks like," she said. "This is what happens when you underestimate someone." She turned and walked away. Nate called after her, his voice cracking. "Maggie, please." She did not look back. Outside, Ruth was waiting with the car. Maggie climbed in and let the door close behind her, sealing out the chaos and the cameras and the wreckage she had created. "How do you feel?" Ruth asked. Maggie thought about it. She thought about 5 years of cruelty. She thought about the gala where her life had ended and the gala where she had returned to end theirs. She thought about everything she had lost and everything she had found. "I feel," she said slowly, like I can finally breathe. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Federal investigators descended on the Harrison Foundation within 24 hours of Elena's broadcast. Arthur Harrison was taken into custody for questioning, emerging gray-faced and silent, his lawyers trailing behind him like mourners at a funeral. Charges were filed by the end of the week: wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, misappropriation of charitable funds. If convicted, he faced up to 30 years in federal prison. Genevieve retreated to their vacation home in Florida, reportedly refusing to see anyone, including her own children. The Scranton revelation had done something to her that the financial scandal had not, shattering the identity she had constructed over 4 decades. She was not Genevieve Harrison, Boston aristocrat. She was Genevieve Miller, factory worker's daughter, pretender, fraud. Chloe's engagement was officially dissolved within 48 hours. Bradley Ashworth Sr. issued a terse statement expressing disappointment and wishing the Harrison family well in their difficulties. Bradley Jr. was rumored to be dating a hedge fund manager's daughter before the week was out, and Victoria Pemberton vanished. She fled the gala before the broadcast even finished, disappearing into the night with nothing but her phone and her lies. Her sister Rebecca was arrested 3 days later in Connecticut, charged with fraud and conspiracy. Victoria herself became a ghost, spotted once in Florida, once in Mexico, then not at all. The pregnancy, it was eventually confirmed, had been fake, another tool in her arsenal of manipulation, deployed to trap another wealthy man. DNA testing was no longer necessary. Nate Harrison filed for divorce from Maggie 2 weeks after the gala. It was, his lawyers claimed, a formality. The marriage had been over for years. He sought nothing from her, wanted nothing to do with her, asked only for a quiet ending to what had become a very public disaster. Maggie signed the papers without reading them. She did not want his money. She had never wanted his money. She had only ever wanted to be seen. Now the whole world saw her. The narrative shifted overnight. Margaret Cole Harrison, the gold digger who stole from her husband's family, became Margaret Cole, the self-made millionaire who exposed corruption and brought down a criminal enterprise. The same media outlets that had crucified her now wanted interviews, profiles, inspirational stories about her rise from foster care to fortune. She turned most of them down. Her story was not a commodity. Her pain was not content. But she did give one interview to Elena Santos for the platform that had published the investigation. She told her story simply and completely, from the Oklahoma trailer park to the Cambridge coffee shop to the Boston Harbor hotel ballroom. She talked about building clear path, about hiding her success, about the particular loneliness of pretending to be less than you are so the people who claim to love you will not feel threatened. And she talked about survival. I learned very early that no one was coming to save me, Maggie said, looking directly into the camera. Not the foster system, not a knight on a white horse, not anyone. If I was going to have a life worth living, I had to build it myself. And I did. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. What the Harrisons did to me was cruel. It was criminal. It caused real damage that will take years to repair. But it did not destroy me. Because they made the same mistake that everyone makes with people like me. They assumed that because I came from nothing, I was nothing. She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side. I am not nothing. I never was. The accounts were unfrozen 6 weeks after the gala. James Wheeler, the public defender who had become something like a friend, called her with the news. The fraud investigation had concluded. The claims against ClearPath had been found baseless. The funds were being released immediately. $47 million, suddenly accessible. 5 years of work, restored. Maggie sat in Ruth's apartment with the phone in her hand, staring at the balance on her screen, trying to feel something. Joy, maybe, or vindication, or the particular satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. Instead, she felt tired, bone deep, exhausted in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. Now what? Ruth asked, settling onto the couch beside her. Now I figure out who I am, Maggie said. Without them, without the hiding, without the pretending. That sounds terrifying. It is. But it is also, she paused, searching for the word, free. I have never been free before. Not really. There was always something I was hiding from, something I was protecting myself against. Now, there is just me. Just you and $47 million, Ruth pointed out. Maggie laughed. Yes, that too. She bought a house in Cambridge 3 months after the divorce was finalized. It was a modest Victorian, nothing like the Harrison mansion, with a small garden and a wraparound porch and rooms that felt lived in rather than staged. She chose it because the light was good and the neighbors were friendly, and there was a bedroom on the first floor that would work perfectly for Helen, who had agreed to move in with a minimum of persuasion. Someone has to keep you company, Helen had said, already packing her boxes. And my stories need an audience. The move and day was a celebration of sorts. Ruth brought champagne. Darnell brought his girlfriend and a casserole that was surprisingly good. James Wheeler stopped by with flowers and an apology for not being able to stay. And then it was quiet. Maggie stood on her new porch, watching the evening light fade over the neighborhood, listening to Helen and Ruth laugh about something in the kitchen. She thought about everything she had survived, everything she had built, everything she had lost and found again. Her phone buzzed, an email notification. She opened it, expecting nothing important, and her breath caught. The sender was a law firm in Oklahoma City. The subject line read, Catherine Miller Cole, Inquiry. She read the email twice, 3 times, her heart pounding. Catherine Miller Cole was her mother, the woman who had abandoned her when she was 4 years old, the woman she had been told was dead. The email was brief and formal. The law firm was representing a client who claimed to be her biological mother. The client had seen the news coverage. The client had information that might be of interest. Would Ms. Cole be willing to speak with their office? Maggie stared at the screen, her mind racing. Her mother was alive. Her mother had been watching. Her mother wanted to make contact. For 30 years, Maggie had believed she was alone in the world. No family, no roots, no one who remembered her as a child, who knew her history, who could tell her where she came from. Now, suddenly, impossibly, that might not be true. Helen appeared in the doorway, wine glass in hand, and saw Maggie's expression. "What is it?" she asked, concern sharpening her voice. Maggie handed her the phone. Helen read the email slowly, her face cycling through surprise, understanding, and finally, a gentle warmth. "Well," she said, "this is unexpected. I do not know what to do. You do not have to decide right now." "What if it is a scam?" Maggie asked, the fear suddenly breaking through. "What if someone saw the news and is trying to take advantage? What if—" Helen cut her off. "What if it is real? What if your mother is alive and has been looking for you? What if you have a chance to know where you come from?" Maggie closed her eyes. The old instinct was strong, the one that had kept her safe for 30 years. Protect yourself, hide, do not let anyone close enough to hurt you. But she was tired of hiding. She was tired of being afraid. "I want to know," she said. "Even if it hurts, I want to know who she is." "Then you know what to do." Maggie looked at the email again. She thought about her mother, whoever she was, watching the news coverage and recognizing her daughter. She thought about 30 years of silence and separation and the courage it must have taken to reach out. She opened a reply. "Dear Ms. Garcia," she typed, "thank you for your email. I would be very interested in speaking with your client. Please let me know how to proceed." She hesitated for just a moment. Then she hit send. Whatever came next, she would face it. She had survived worse. She had built herself from nothing. Not once, but twice. But she knew now that she was capable of anything, and for the first time in her life, she was ready to stop surviving and start living. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in late spring. Maggie chose a quiet cafe in Cambridge, a place with good light and comfortable chairs, and enough ambient noise to mask a private conversation. She arrived early, as she always did, and chose a table in the corner where she could watch the door. Ruth had offered to come with her. Helen had insisted, but Maggie had declined both offers. This was something she needed to do alone. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman walked through the door. She was older than Maggie had expected, perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair and a nervous energy that manifested in the way she clutched her purse, the way her eyes scanned the room. She was thin, almost fragile, dressed simply in jeans and a cardigan that looked like it had been chosen with care. Their eyes met across the cafe. Catherine Cole had Maggie's eyes, hazel, flecked with gold, the same eyes that had stared back at Maggie from every mirror for 34 years. Seeing them in another face was disorienting, like meeting a ghost of herself. Catherine approached the table slowly, each step seeming to require enormous effort. "Margaret," she said, and her voice cracked on the name. "You look just like I imagined." Maggie stood. She did not know what to do with her hands, so she clasped them in front of her. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Please sit down." They sat across from each other, separated by a small table and 30 years of silence. A server appeared, took their orders, disappeared again. The cafe continued around them, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "I do not know where to start," Catherine said finally. "I have practiced this conversation 1,000 times. I have imagined what I would say, how I would explain. But now that you are here, in front of me, I cannot remember any of it." "Start at the beginning," Maggie said. "Tell me why you left." Catherine closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet with tears. "I was 17 when I got pregnant," she said. 17 years old, no job, no education, no way to support a child. My parents were," she paused, searching for the word, "traditional, religious. When they found out I was pregnant, they gave me a choice. Give the baby up for adoption or leave." "I was not given up for adoption," Maggie said. "I was in foster care. They told me my parents were dead." "I know." Catherine's voice was thick with grief. That was not supposed to happen. "My parents, they arranged everything. A private adoption," they said. "A good family who would give you opportunities I never could. They told me I was doing the right thing, the only thing." She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I signed the papers when I was still in the hospital. I was young and scared, and I did not know what else to do. They took you away, and I did not even get to say goodbye." "But I was not adopted," Maggie pressed. "I was in the system. How did that happen?" Catherine shook her head. "I do not know exactly. What I learned later, years later, was that the lawyer my parents used was a fraud. He took their money, and he took you, and he sold you to whoever would pay. You ended up in state custody because he got caught, and his entire operation collapsed." "You could have found me," Maggie said. "You could have looked." "I did look." Catherine's voice broke. "I looked for years, but the records were sealed. I did not know what name you had been given. I did not know where you had been placed. Every time I got close, I hit a wall. And then my parents died, and I found out the truth about what they had done. And I tried again, and I still could not find you." She reached across the table, her hands stopping just short of Maggie's. I never stopped looking, Margaret. Not for one day. And then I saw you on the news. That interview where you told your story, and I knew. I knew it was you. I recognized your eyes. They are my mother's eyes. Your grandmother's eyes. Maggie looked at this woman, this stranger who was also her mother. She had spent 30 years believing she was alone in the world, that no one had wanted her, that she had been discarded like garbage. Now she was learning that she had been stolen, that her mother had been young and frightened and manipulated, that the abandonment she had carried like a wound was based on a lie. I do not know how to feel, Maggie said honestly. I want to believe you. I want this to be true. But I have spent my whole life learning not to trust anyone, learning that people leave, learning that I can only rely on myself. I know. Catherine's tears were flowing freely now. I know I cannot undo 30 years of pain. I cannot give you back the childhood you should have had. I cannot be the mother you deserved. She finally let her hand rest on Maggie's. But I can be here now, if you will let me. I can tell you where you come from. I can show you photographs of your grandmother, who you look so much like. I can answer any question you have for as long as you want to ask. Maggie looked at their hands, joined across the table. Her mother's fingers were thin and work-worn, the nails bitten short. They were not elegant hands. They were survivor's hands, just like her own. I have questions, Maggie said. A lot of questions. I have time, Catherine squeezed her hand. I have all the time in the world. They talked for 4 hours. Catherine told Maggie about her grandmother, a fierce Oklahoma woman who had raised 7 children through drought and depression. She told her about the small town where she had grown up, about the father Maggie had never known, about the years of searching and hoping and grieving. Maggie told Catherine about foster care, about building Clearpath, about the Harrisons and their destruction. She told her about Ruth and Helen, the family she had chosen. She told her about learning to survive and the harder task of learning to live. When the cafe closed, they walked to a park nearby and kept talking as the sun set and the stars emerged. Catherine showed her photographs on her phone, baby pictures of Maggie that Catherine had hidden for 30 years, pictures of grandmother and aunts and cousins that Maggie had never known existed. She had a family, not just Ruth and Helen, not just the connection she had built, but actual blood relatives who shared her history and her face. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. What happens now? Maggie asked, as they finally prepared to part. Whatever you want to happen, Catherine said. I will go back to Oklahoma if that is what you need. Or I could stay, get an apartment nearby, give you time to adjust. Whatever you are comfortable with. Maggie thought about it. She thought about the walls she had built and the slow, painful process of dismantling them. She thought about trust and fear and the particular courage of opening yourself to someone new. I am not comfortable with any of this, she said honestly. I do not know how to be someone's daughter. I do not know how to have a family. Catherine nodded, her expression sad but understanding. But I want to learn, Maggie continued. I want to try. Will you stay? Catherine's face transformed. The tears came again, but this time they were accompanied by a smile so bright it was almost painful to look at. I will stay as long as you want me, she said. I am not going anywhere. Not ever again. They hugged, awkwardly at first, 2 strangers trying to figure out how to be family. But then something shifted, and Maggie felt her mother's arms tighten around her, and she let herself be held. For 34 years she had been alone. Now, finally, she was not. 6 months later, Maggie stood at a podium in a conference hall in Boston, looking out at an audience of 500 women. The conference was called Building Your Freedom, Financial Independence for Women. Maggie had organized it herself, funded it herself, chosen every speaker and every session. It was the culmination of a year of planning, a year of turning her pain into something useful. In the front row, she could see Ruth and Helen sitting side by side, Behind them, Darnell, with his girlfriend, James Wheeler, who had become a friend, Elena Santos, who was covering the conference for her platform, and in the second row, sitting quietly, nervously, Catherine Cole. "Welcome," Maggie said into the microphone. "My name is Margaret Cole, and I want to tell you a story." She talked for 45 minutes. She told them about growing up in foster care, about learning that no one was coming to save her, about building a business in secret because she was afraid of what would happen if anyone knew what she was capable of. She told them about the Harrisons, about the gala, about the destruction. She told them about losing everything and getting it back, and learning that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. And then she told them about her mother. "For 30 years, I believed I was alone," Maggie said. "I believed that no one wanted me. I believed that I had been abandoned, discarded, forgotten. And that belief shaped everything I did. It made me strong, but it also made me afraid. It made me successful, but it also made me lonely." She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. "A year ago, I found out that my mother had been looking for me my whole life, that I had been stolen, not abandoned, that the story I had been telling myself for 30 years was wrong." She smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had finally made peace with her past. "I am not telling you this because it has a happy ending. I am telling you this because our stories matter. The things we believe about ourselves, the narratives we carry, they shape who we become. And sometimes those stories are wrong." She leaned into the microphone. "If you are carrying a story that tells you that you are not good enough, that you do not deserve success, that you are alone, I want you to question it. I want you to look at it carefully and ask yourself, is this true? Or is this just what I was told?" The audience was completely silent, completely focused. "You deserve to be seen," Maggie said. "You deserve to be valued. You deserve to build something that is yours. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they are wrong. Prove them wrong. Build something anyway." She stepped back from the podium. "Thank you," she said. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. 500 women on their feet, clapping and cheering for a woman who had survived everything the world could throw at her and come out the other side. Maggie looked at her mother in the second row, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Ruth and Helen, beaming with pride. She looked at everyone who had helped her get here, everyone who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself, and she smiled. The Harrison family had tried to destroy her. They had called her worthless, gold digger, thief. They had manufactured evidence and arranged her arrest and paraded her humiliation in front of everyone who mattered. They had been wrong? They had been so wrong. Margaret Cole was not worthless. She was a survivor, a builder, a fighter. She was a daughter and a friend and a mentor. She was living proof that where you come from does not determine where you end up. And she was just getting started. Now, if you are ready to hear how Margaret Cole went from arrested in a pink dress to standing over the ruins of the family that tried to destroy her, settle in. This story is 1 hour and 40 minutes of twists you will not believe. And if you find yourself thinking about someone who needs to hear this, someone who has been told they are not enough, someone who is fighting a battle the world does not see, share this story with them. Sometimes the right words at the right time can change everything. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what comes next. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever been underestimated? I read every single one. Now, let us begin.